So what are we supposed to talk about today then?
The third scope.
Okay, compassion. Okay, all right then, that's
Yeah.
fine.
And we didn't do the mandala last time. Maybe we can open with the mandala.
That's auspicious to do, yeah.
Okay, one moment. Whoop. Okay, welcome everybody tonight with Venerable Robina. We'll do the short mandala offering. I'll recite it in English.
And the reason we're doing it, remember, why we're doing it, you've got to tell people why we're doing it, Tara. It's making an offering as a request for the teachings, as you see in the words, you know. I mean, a short mandala, yeah, you're offering for the teachings. That's what you're doing.
Yes, offering for the teachings.
That's what you're doing. Okay, go on.
The ground is blessed with scent and with flowers strewn, adorned with Mount Muru, the four continents, the sun and moon, transformed as a pure land and offered. May all transitory beings enjoy this Buddha land. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued, exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nirayatami.
Okay, so with our motive, we think we're going to listen to these teachings so we can take some tools from it, so we can develop our marvelous qualities, so we can be a benefit to others, all the way, this most expansive motivation of all, so that we become a Buddha to benefit others. So we're just thinking, we say it in Tibetan a couple of times, Sangye Cherang, Soke Chognam La, Jangcho Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chonyan Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Shok, Sangye Cherang, Soke Chognam La, Jangcho Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chonyan Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Shok. I take refuge, I rely upon the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha till I'm enlightened, and by the virtuous action of listening to these teachings, may I become a Buddha to benefit all. Okay, good. Okay, people. So, okay. So you said I mentioned it last week, did I? I mentioned it last week, did I? You said I did.
Yes. Yes, you mentioned bodhicitta and emptiness, and we should be the third scope.
I know that, but they're in the third scope. So how
Yeah.
much did I last week?
You briefed on emptiness a bit, but you said you'd save it till next week.
Okay, fine. Okay, so the whole
And we
thing.
didn't do bodhicitta, we didn't do bodhisattva.
Okay, fine. So, okay, the whole thing about the path is, I think it takes us a while to see this, is how it is gradual, how it is incremental. Like any body of knowledge, if you start to learn a body of knowledge, it's in a coherent order. We get that. But but initially it's hard to see this, because we hear about karma, it sounds just as complicated as hearing about something else. In fact, when we hear about compassion, it almost sounds easier, which is actually more advanced. So we really have to go step by step. And for example, it's not possible. We're going to talk today about how to get bodhicitta, this next stage, but it's not possible to understand the levels of compassion that the Buddha is saying we need to accomplish in order to manifest, in order to culminate in bodhicitta. I mean, these levels are kind of outrageous. So I think in our culture, when we think of compassion, it's a bit sentimental, and often that's what drives any Western people, modern people, to a spiritual path. And we think, oh, that's what it's all about. But unless we do the earlier teachings, unless we understand the mind, unless we understand karma, it is literally not possible to develop the levels of compassion that these teachings tell us. It's impossible. It seems like insane. And the simple way to show that is the very first technique in this development of bodhicitta, which is the next phase of practice. There's two main techniques. One I think is called the six causes and one effect or something, and one is called something like exchanging self for others or something like that. So the Pabonka Rinpoche in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand puts together 11 little techniques. He combines these two, And the foundation practice for all of these, and the absolutely necessary to get before we begin to develop love and compassion, is to develop what they call equanimity. So we have to understand what that means, obviously. It's very precise. Each of these terms is very precise. I think we don't realize, I think, in all the definitions of these words like love, compassion, equanimity, they're not just wishy-washy feelings. They've got very precise meaning, and and each leads to the next. So the precision and clarity that we know you need just to make a cake, that's the kind of clarity you need to know your mind and to understand these different practices. So equanimity, in the earlier stages of practice, you would use that word, and what you would get from practicing the wisdom wing, controlling your body, speech, and mind, one of the evident results of that would you become more stable in yourself. You'd have more equanimity in your own personality. That's one meaning. But here it's quite different. The usage of the word is completely different. This equanimity here is this the very first of all the development of bodhicitta is this heartfelt recognition that friend, enemy, and stranger, a person whom you're attached to, a person you have aversion for, and a person about whom you are completely indifferent. And frankly, that's the way of fitting every sentient being in the universe. They will fit into one of these three. There's no fourth category. In other words, these are the three objects of the three poisons. The friend, by definition, is the object of attachment. Aversion, by definition, the enemy or the person we dislike is the object of aversion. And the third person, a stranger, is the object of an aspect of ignorance, a complete kind of indifference. So nobody questions this on the planet. It's totally normal. Animals have it, humans have it, because we have the three poisons, because we have ego grasping. And that's how we lead our lives, and no one questions. So in other words, what we're getting to here, equanimity, is the heartfelt recognition that those three beings, those categories of people, meaning the entire universe of beings, are equal to each other from one point of view. They're equal to each other from one point of view. They each want happiness and they each don't want suffering. And we're trying to prove that logically. There's not some gooey feeling. In all these meditations in these stages here, they're all you using logic and analysis to argue with ego's misconceptions, because they're not going to change otherwise, because they're so ingrained. Our delusions are so ingrained. We need to use clear logic to argue with them to show that they have no valid basis. So it's not that easy, because there's nothing to do with having emotional feelings, nothing to do with that. But to see this as logical. So why are we trying to prove to ourselves that a friend, an enemy, and a stranger are equal from one point of view? Why? Because why is very clear. At the moment, we have love and compassion. There's no question, we have it. But it's only for the first category. It's pretty obvious. We only have love and compassion naturally, for our beloveds, meaning those we're attached to. But even more crucial than that, we have love and compassion for those we're attached to, but for those who also fulfill my attachment. This is very clear. Naturally, there's no natural feeling to love and have compassion for people who harm us, just naturally. And so we think it's the weirdest thing. Why on earth would I want to have love and compassion for them? Sounds too weird for us. And the strangers, they just don't come into our radar. We couldn't care less, and that's 99.99% of the world. And it's very shocking to think this. I mean, it shows how shockingly self-centered these three states of mind are. We only love and think about those who are kind to us and like us and do what we want. We do not love and do not want to be happy and do not want to not suffer the ones who mean to us, and we just simply couldn't care about the rest. So we have to look at the logic of that. It's quite shocking. Because, well, why? Because we're trying to have love and compassion for everybody. So that's why if you think love and if you think compassion, we have compassion. I mean, even more than for just, we also can see that we even do have compassion for more than just the friends. When we open our iPad and read the news and watch the television, all we're doing is seeing incredible suffering on this planet, and they are strangers, but it moves us. So we do have that compassion when we see this terrible suffering of wars and poverty or people being harmed. But we don't, but still it's only a selective group of people. We have to be an innocent victim for us to have compassion, That's very clear. I mean, if you see a person harm someone and then the person who harms gets hurt themselves, we think, they deserve it. May they suffer, So you've got to, for us to have love and compassion for people, you've got to be an innocent victim, and that's very limited. And so we have to unpack all this. And the fact is, It's not easy to understand this level of compassion unless we've unpacked the delusions and understood attachment and aversion back in the middle scope. That's why that's why Pamonka Rinpoche says, for example, in these more advanced practices of transforming problems into happiness, a major method for getting bodhicitta, as he says, you've got to be a suitable vessel. You've got to know your mind and have done a lot of practice in the earlier stages. That's why the compassion wing is hugely more advanced. So the logic now, the so-called logic of ego, which of course is not logic, is I definitely want you to be happy. So the definition of love is a thought. It starts with a thought, a conceptual thought that wants others to be. It says, may you be happy. Eventually, of course, you grow that and it becomes enormous affection. We know that. May you be happy. And the compassion is, may you not suffer. So that's why to try to see that everybody wants happiness and nobody wants suffering. What we're trying to do here with equanimity is make that the basis for our loving people and having compassion for them. Because now ego's reason for loving someone is because they do what I want. Ego's reason for having compassion is because they're our friend. Mostly that. So we're shifting the reasoning. And once we recognize clearly and logically, and it demands logic, I promise, that everybody is driven by the wish to be happy. I mean, that means, they want to be happy. So, see, that's the thing. As soon as we hear, oh, that evil pedophile, we try to see that the pedophile, who is the object of aversion, let's say, wants to be happy. That's completely too weird, because the first thing we say is, and we think of a person who's harmful, and then we try to think, I've got to see that he wants to be happy. The first thing we say is, what do you mean he wants to be happy? He doesn't deserve happiness. So we have this powerful kind of assumption about deserve, and that means those who deserve my love and compassion are those who do what my attachment wants. It's as brutal as that, So it's so many layers to all these delusions. We really have to unpack them and see them. So this one of just seeing everyone wants happiness and no one wants suffering sounds easy, but it's quite hard. So let's look at this. So as we're talking, think of three people, put three people right in front of you. So for your enemy, we mightn't use that word, but it's a good term for those we don't like, and which means for people who don't agree with us or have the wrong politics or do harmful things to us or don't like what we like. There's groups of people, countries of people, politicians, or of course close people as well, the ex-husband and things like that. So have that person right in front of you as we're talking, And then to the left, have a beloved. And of course, in our daily lives, that person often goes one day we hate them, next day we love them, so we can have the same person. But think of another person who's your beloved, to the left in front of you, and to the right in front of you, put a person's face, a stranger, but sort of know them enough to put them there. And that's the point about what a stranger is. By definition, a stranger for us, the object of indifference, a person who's a long way away from us, is a person who's neither harmed nor helped us. That's really clear. Because if you've helped me, you're a friend. If you've harmed me, you're an enemy. A stranger has done neither. So we have attachment and energy for the first person and do have love and compassion. We have anger and hate, and depending on the level, for the enemy, and don't have love and compassion. And we have to struggle not to want them to suffer. And the third person, we just don't care. We literally, they're a long way away, We can see that. And this is because of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, the three root delusions. And of course, we don't talk this way in our modern psychology. We don't make this a goal to understand the three poisons and get rid of them. So it's weird. So we just think it's natural. So how you prove it, it's not that difficult. There's one really logical way to prove it. Sort of think of these three people now, have them in front of you. Friend to the left, enemy in front, stranger to the right. Now think of yourself, and swap the thing around and see these three people, and then you see. So if you look at the first person, your friend, and you see them looking at you, and you know they adore you. We have some people, maybe we have one person who adores us, likes you a lot. So you can see them looking at you. You can see their face and they're smiling. Because you can see, this is my point, when they look at you, they see a friend. So in this case, you be the friend. They're seeing a friend. You can tell by how they look at you. You know they love you. You know they adore you. You know they're attached to you. So they're seeing a lovely person. That's clear. So they're seeing you as the friend. So at this moment, when you're with that person, you're labeled a friend, okay? Now, look at your ex-boyfriend, look at your ex-husband, or the person at work who really dislikes you. You know, you're looking at you daggers. You can tell by how they're looking. They can't stand you, meaning what they're seeing is an ugly person. They seek your enemy. They don't like you. You upset them. We know we are that for somebody on the planet. So now suddenly you're now labeled an enemy, aren't you? You're labeled by that person. They're seeing an enemy, and that's now you. Now you're an enemy. Now get the stranger, you know, the next door neighbor, the person down the road you'd never talk to, and they're looking at you and you're just the same to them, you're a stranger. So you're very boring to them. You don't touch their life. You haven't had communication. They neither like you nor dislike you, so therefore they are indifferent. So they're just seeing a boring person. Now see what I'm getting at? Those three people, if they wrote a description of you, you know they're describing three different people. But you know, no matter whether they see a friend or enemy, this is my point now, you are exactly the same and feel exactly the same in terms of only wanting to be happy, in terms of only wanting not to suffer, no matter who's looking at you. So it's sort of, and that's the thing, we put these labels onto these three people, and we see them as absolute labels, as concrete labels. We paint each person, one looks beautiful, one looks ugly, and one looks boring. And of course, intellectually, we know this is superficial, but this is the reality of the three poisons. And that's how we treat everybody in the entire universe. We know this is true, and that's why it's so outrageous, because you meaning Buddha's wanting me to love everybody equally? It just seems exhausting, you know. And of course, it's part of chipping away at these delusions. So the first thing is to change the logical reason for why I say, may you be happy. They're the only people I say that to now, and that's the definition of love, are the beloveds. And they are the ones who do what my attachment wants. We've got this massive vested interest in doing what that person wants, you know. So I use another example. It's obvious, a silly one, but it's so clear. Let's say there's some fellow down the road. Let's say, there's someone that you've never met. He lives down the road. And let's say there's Catherine. Let's say there's this bloke. Okay, I've got to have a bloke. And there's Andreas, okay? So there's Andreas. He lives down the road and he's a friend of Catherine. And Catherine is my friend, and she tells me about Andreas, and that he's her friend. I don't know the man. I've seen him. He's down the road, you know. He lives down there. I see that. But he's a stranger to me. And she says, oh, Robina, he gets these terrible migraines. And she's his friend, you know. And I try to sound interested. Oh, really? Does he? Then I say, pass the coffee, please. I couldn't care. I don't care. He doesn't. I mean, I'm feeling sorry for about 2 minutes, isn't it? But we know that. It's normal. Because he's a stranger, because he doesn't touch my life. And now I meet Andreas, and now we fall in love, and I move in with Andreas. Now look at the difference between me then and me later. Now all I think of is Andreas all day. I spend my money on Andreas. I take him to the hospital. I love him. People go, oh, Robina's got so much compassion and love for Andreas, how kind she is. Well, excuse me, I didn't do a damn thing last week. He could have dropped dead from his migraines. I didn't care. Now, we know that, but we don't join the dots. We think, oh, that's natural. But no, it just shows how irrational we are, that I'm only going to love and take care of people who make me happy. I mean, how self-centered can you be? But that's the point we're trying to see. This is shocking because this is normal world's behavior. Buddha's trying to point out that it's completely self-centered. And no, it's why we have wars and armies and murders and divorces. And then now Andreas cheats on me with Tara, and he moves in Tara, and he throws me out, and now Andreas is in the enemy category, and I think, may he suffer from his migraines. I mean, we know this. We know we are like this, but we never question it. We just think it's normal life. So this is why the compassion wing is so shocking. This is just the first of these 11 techniques that culminate in this bodhicitta, you know. But this is the basis for developing love and compassion, and it's very hard. because the delusions run us. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance drive us completely, you know. They're spontaneous. You have to learn them from your mother. So but we have to be confident. It's not a gooey feeling, oh, everyone's the same. No, you've got to see the logic of it. So, and that's why the example of yourself is a good one. You know it's true, whether the person who adores you looking at you and you're a friend, the person hates you looking at you and you're an enemy, the person who's bored by looking at you and you're a stranger, you know you're just the same person. You're the same person. You want to be happy all the time. You want to not suffer all the time. It's obvious. That's the proof. But I've got to hear that. So how do you put this into practice every day, you know? You got to chip away at it. And this is not getting love and compassion yet. This is the basis. This is just getting the truth of equanimity, that everyone's happy and no one's suffering. I'm not trying to say love everybody yet. That's the next step. That's 3 steps on, 4 steps on. 1 step at a time. It's incremental little stages, you know? So the thing here is how you put this into practice. I mean, I think if, you know, let's say you're a grandmother and you have this gorgeous grandchild, and grandmas adore their grandchildren, of course they do. And you're taking care of your beautiful angel, and they're playing with the next door kid, and the kid's a smelly, ugly kid who's mean and nasty, you know, and you can't stand him. You know you just don't like this kid. And then automatically you adore your little beloved angel, and you're annoyed at this ugly kid next door. So you stop in the tracks and you say to yourself, Robina, please, he might, you see, the thing is, it doesn't mean he's a saint. If we think a person wants to be happy, we think they have to be a nice person. No, it's not the point. Pedophiles want to be happy. Mr. Trump wants to be happy. Multi-murderers want to be happy. That's why they do things to harm others, because they think it'll make them happy. So none of this is the reason. There's no logic. There's no deserve or anything. So this kid might be a mean kid. He might be nasty. But the thing is, you've got to recognize that what drives him, and this is what Buddha is saying all the time, what everybody in the universe is driven by the wish to be happy and not suffer. And this is continuous. It's not occasionally. In fact, when we understand the Dharma back in high school, middle scope, we realize that we're all driven by happiness, wish to be happy and not suffer. And of course, the methods we use are the big problem. We think getting attachment objects is the method. We think, you know, harming others who don't do what we want is the method. Look at the world. So it's not a question. So we're trying to see we all are driven by the wish to be happy. Then when we're going to get further on advanced, and we'll realize people use methods that aren't going to make them happy. All they do is make them suffer. And that's how we've got to first establish that they're driven by the wish to be happy. That's all we're trying to do in this first step. And that's already tremendous. So you say to yourself, Robina, give it a break. This little kid, yes, you've got to watch him. He might be nasty. He might be. He might have delusions. He might be a mean kid. But he only wants to be happy. He only doesn't want to suffer. Exactly the same as your little angel, you know. This is a tough one. Because as soon as we hear about happiness and suffering, we feel the person has to deserve it, you know. It's very strong for us. It's hard to see, because the first thing is, what do you mean he wants to be happy? What do you mean he wants to be happy? We will say he doesn't deserve happiness. And that deserve, I can't describe how heavy that is for us. That runs our lives, you know, and that's totally rooted in attachment and aversion back in the middle scope. So to really look at that deserve one, and also the view of no karma. So we've got to unpack that one. Deserve has got nothing to do with it, you know. Deserve has got nothing to do with it. So that's equanimity, right? Very clear, but it takes time. Catch yourself, you know. Like, you know, if you're in a line at a shop or something and there's some cute person, oh, go in front of me, please. But another mean person trying to push in, excuse me, go behind, you know. So because you don't like one and you like the other. You're happy. But so just check up. They're both the same. So you get a mean person and a kind person, and you just remind yourself, Robina, they're both driven by the wish to be happy. That's all we're trying to prove. And we build on that. We build on that in these techniques. It's not a sentimental thing. It's a logical thing. In other words, what we're trying to do is change the reasoning from I want Andreas to be happy because he's in love with me and I adore him, to I want Andreas to be happy because he wants to be happy. Whether he makes me happy is the point. It's not even relevant. That's the point. That's the point. And that's really intense. To think this is possible seems crazy, you know. Of course, when you think that, Like say, there's a smelly kid next door and your divine grandchild, and you see they both want to be happy and don't want to suffer, and you have this equanimity. Then you think, well, who cares? Why not just move in the little ugly kid and give my little grandchild to the next door neighbor? That's not the point either, because you've got karma with people. You have certain karmic connection with certain people. And if you have children, yes, you absolutely have the responsibility to love them and take care of them. But in your mind, if you're trying to achieve bodhicitta, the ugly people, the smelly ones, the mean ones are feeling the same. That's the basis for beginning to develop love and compassion. To see that. And that's really intensely hard when you have aversion or indifference, because they paint very different pictures. I mean, we can see with mothers, we can see if she says whatever, whatever makes you happy, sweetheart, I'm happy for you. That's tremendous. That's going beyond attachment, For equanimity is the very first one. But the only way you're going to know that other people only want to be happy is by looking at yourself. We are driven. We are driven, by the wish to be happy, driven by the wish not to suffer, non-stop, 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 And that's what we're trying to prove. It's a primordial drive in every sentient being. Just by definition, being a sentient being, you're driven by the wish to be happy. And what Buddha's saying is, honey, I found some methods. That's all he's saying. And then when you know the methods for yourself, giving up attachment, stop harming others, then you'll see others are doing the same. And so you've got a basis for all this, Then the next step, of course, we know of these 11 techniques go through these stages, these kind of points to cultivate. How, for example, this point, the next point is, which is the very Buddhist concept of beginningless mind, and there are trillions of sentient beings. So we've all had countless lifetimes. So basically, we've all bumped into each other countless times. And of course, they use the example of they will be my mother. It's just an example of a person who's nurtured us, Then the third point is, then the mother is kind. There's 2 points to the third point. 3A is mother is kind. The 3B is all beings are kind. So I think this first one is really good for us in the West, because we often don't like our mothers, totally blame them for our suffering, and our psychological models would agree with us. So it's weird to think that your mother's kind when anybody can see that she's deluded, she's an alcoholic, she's harmed other people. Of course there are people like that. But I think what's so shocking, and I think it's very curious in our world, that somehow we have a deep assumption that if our mother, somehow we all assume our mother should be a saint. If she's going to give birth to me, she better bloody be perfect, So what shocks us tremendously is that our mother harmed us. We have no reasoning in our universe to understand this. So having the view of karma, it completely makes sense, So therefore, with this view of, it's a really good practice to try and cultivate the view that your mother, your alcoholic mother, your possessive mother, your deluded mother, your narcissistic mother, your mother has still done good things. And it's a powerful practice. I know many of my Buddhist friends have purposely done this. Yes, they've got self-centered mums, Of course, people are self-centered. Why are you so surprised? Just because they're your mother. So the thing is, though, you know yourself. When a person just paints you, if you're the mother, we know that if you're the mother and you know your child is resentful of you and never talks to you and blames you for all their suffering, you know the pain of it is unbearable, because you know it's not the whole story. You know that. So it's a powerful practice to look into, to look freshly at your mother, to look freshly and look very calmly, and look at and simply make a list in your mind, whatever you want, of the things that she's done in her life that helped you. So, the first one is, excuse me, she gave birth to you, or if she got you for the orphanage, she bought you, whatever, she chose you at the orphanage. But, or in other words, the first point is your mother didn't abort you. This is a very powerful point. I always quote this. A friend of mine, a man I met, he said years ago, when he's like 40 or something, his mother told him when he was like 40 that she had decided to have an abortion. She was in the hospital in her gown, ready to go to have the abortion. And suddenly she stood up, she opened the door, and she changed her mind. It blew his mind to hear this. He could not believe it. In other words, his mother consciously decided not to kill him. This blew his mind. Now my feeling about that one is that the fact is she did do that. She made the choice. Our mother maybe didn't make that choice, but many mothers give their babies away. So one of the first things that mother did was she decided not to abort you. She gave you away instead. But that's something that's very hard to hear, because one of the greatest pains for some people is this awful feeling of being rejected, But I mean, she gave you away. She didn't kill you. I mean, it sounds like ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous. It's powerful. But your mother gave birth to you. Your mother cleaned your bottom. Your mother got up in the middle of the night when you were crying. Your mother fed you. Even when she was neurotic, even if she was an alcoholic. In fact, you should be more grateful for her kindness because she's neurotic, I mean, I'm just saying certain things. And we say, well, what do you mean think of the kind things she's done? She was supposed to do that. It's her job. But it helps our mind, it really helps us see. If we say she's a mean, ugly mother, you're painting her with one brush. She might have done some bad things, yes. But as I said yourself, you're not just one thing. It's a very good example, very good, I think, exercise to do, Then, see, the other thing about kindness is a very interesting point. When we say a person is kind, my feeling is we either mean they've got this kind nature. You just some people are like that, they just got this kind nature. That makes sense. But the other way we tend to think when we say a person is kind, and it's very self-centered, I'm sorry, it means they do what I want. If a person is always doing what you want, of course you think they're kind. Of course you do. So it's a very self-centered analysis. So here, that's not the point. Here, even trying to see your mother as kind, is the fact that she's done anything at all to help you. Anything. And that takes time. But now the second point is even more, in a way, more profound and initially quite ridiculous. 3B is everybody is kind. And this is completely based on the teachings on dependent arising, I tell you. So how is that true? Well, it's logical. It's completely scientifically true that since you were conceived, everything that has facilitated your life up until now definitely is the handiwork of sentient beings. This is a complete scientific fact, but we never think about it. I mean, even just the food my mother ate to keep her healthy, which gave me a body. If she had not eaten food, I would have died in the womb, So this body that we go, my body, excuse me, as soon as it came out of my mother's womb, it was a little lump of cows and fishes and peas and carrots and the death of millions of creatures. That's what my body was, excuse me. That's why these amazing one bodhisattva, I'll never forget Kirti Senchab Rinpoche saying, for a certain level of bodhisattva, obviously he's realized emptiness and got pretty intense bodhicitta, that person, he said, for that bodhisattva, the action of cutting off their hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. I'll never forget those words. Long way to go, baby, okay? So then, since you're a little baby, I came out of the womb and the nurses put me in the warm water. They put my blanket on me, and the little blanket was made of sheep's wool, and my mother fed me. If you think about every tiny thing, that's the clothes you buy, the glasses you wear, the food you eat, the house you live in, the road you drive on, the car you drive, every tiny thing you touch, every tiny thing that facilitates your life, sentient beings have been involved in it. This is a simple fact. But we never, ever think about it, or we just take it for granted. It's their job. What do you mean? They're kind. So this way of seeing kindness, it's the fact that they did it. That without it, you'd be dead. Without it, you'd have nothing. So it's very important. It's very powerful. And it's true. So it's a powerful technique for literally beginning to open our heart and to see literally to see the kindness of all sentient beings. When you paint this picture, the picture we paint now is of attachment. So this picture is a new picture we're trying to paint. And so every being, they've been your mother in the past, so you see, that's why they say mother sentient being. Every person, you go into a shop Or the person at the restaurant just simply serves your meal, or the thing you buy, that was made by somebody. The packaging was made somebody. Somebody thought of it. Somebody went to work and they had constipation and depressed, and they made that package. They did the typesetting, which is the word, the label on your jar of jam, the nutritional value. Someone typeset that. Everything you look at, it didn't fall out of the sky. It's the handiwork of beings. This is a tremendous practice. It can only increase your closeness to others. There's no question, but you've got to think about it, because the default view is attachment, And that's where this has got nothing to do with deserve. I mean, my glasses, because since little girl had glasses, and if I did regular old-fashioned lenses, they're so thick you can't believe it, like +13 down here. So when I was a little girl, they were like wearing saucers on my eyes. So now clever people have made this very thin material. So I'm so grateful to those people. Now, the person who invented my lenses could be a pedophile. I don't know. That doesn't counteract the fact that he still did it. So it's got nothing to do with being a good or bad person. It's got nothing to do with that. It's a view we have, try to see the connectedness between sentient beings and everything that we've ever had in our lives, So these are powerful, really kind of powerful concepts. So at this point, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to get anywhere near emptiness. So maybe we have to go quickly to bodhicitta and then get to emptiness. So do you have any questions, first of all? We'll just leave it there a bit, and then we'll say what bodhicitta is, and then we'll go and bring about emptiness. Are there any questions about what I've said so far? What we're trying to do is change our view, in other words. And that means we've got to see that the default views in our mind, the three poisons, are very primordial. And even though we've been through the first and second scopes, we've done a lot of work already, there's still so much more work to do here. So another point here is this: it's the type of practice that this is. It's quite different. The first stages of practice, which are the teachings that we share with the Theravadan path. People who study in Burma and Thailand, these are the same teachings, exactly the same. And this is the path of pratimoksha, individual liberation. These are the practices and techniques that you would use to achieve your liberation from samsara. So if you continued on that path, you would add to, before you go to the bodhisattva path, you would add getting concentration, you would add the realization of emptiness, and at some point or other, in one life or other, you would achieve liberation and your nirvana, and then at the time of the death of that life, you'd disappear and you wouldn't come back. So that's the Theravadan path, but we don't do that part here. We leave that. That's why we have concentration and wisdom later in the path, in the compassion wing. So the emphasis in the first scope and the second, and therefore the emphasis of those vows, they're called vows of refraining from harming, okay? So that's the energy behind the first level of practice, is to back off, be cautious, don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, give up attachment, give up anger, be cautious, be cautious. And this is the main beneficiary, the basis behind this advice is to help you become less suffering and create less suffering for yourself in the future. You're the main beneficiary of those practices. You are the focus of those practices. In those practices, there's no discussion of helping others. So now we get to the compassion wing. We continue to work on our mind. That is not different. It's exactly the same, but the emphasis is radically different. Now, in the first stages, we're lessening delusions in order for us not to suffer so much. We're continuing to do that, but now this is in reference to how to help sentient beings. The bodhisattva vows are still vows of refraining from harming, whereas the layperson's vows are just don't kill, don't steal. There's no wriggle room. But the bodhisattva vows are more powerful because they are vows that you won't do this and you won't do that. And the basis for them is to do what's best for the other person. So the motivation here is what counts, They're very different. They're more nuanced and they're more profound. But we've got to understand that technically. Otherwise, oh yeah, bodhisattva vows. We don't know what it means, But they're still vows of refraining from harming. There's not, until you've achieved bodhicitta, which is the culmination of all these practices, and we just mentioned the first three, which, after the third one, you go to the fourth, I must repay their kindness. When you've decided that they've been kind, then you start the techniques of exchanging self for others, and then you get love, great love, compassion, great compassion, and then bodhicitta. I mean, we can't go through this, just too much to say. But they're all still working on your mind, but the emphasis, whereas the emphasis also, the main enemy in the first and second scope is attachment. Here, the main enemy is called self-centeredness, selfishness, or as Tibetans call it, self-cherishing, putting self first. The main emphasis before is attachment, the kind of greedy, grasping mind. We're calming that down. Here, the main enemy is because of attachment, we put self first. And that's why the whole of these 11 techniques, you're doing this gradual practice of making this paradigm shift in your mind. When finally, at the 11th point, when you've cultivated this outrageous bodhicitta, where there's no longer the thought of I in the mind, there's no longer the ordinary neurotic thought of I. There's no equivalent in our psychological models, none whatsoever. Maybe in religious psychology, yeah, but a saint, basically a bodhisattva is like a saint. And we don't think naturally, oh, I can be a saint. So it's extraordinary teachings, unbelievable. And compassion, we haven't even begun to touch on it. It's outrageous, it always blows my mind. When you look at these qualities of these bodhisattvas, it's hard to imagine having these qualities, this level of compassion for every tiny sentient being, as if they were your most precious child. You have to understand that's a fact for these people. That's hard to imagine. Hard to even imagine it's possible. But it is. And that's where the more advanced teachings as well for the bodhisattva person, the person on the path to bodhicitta, because you're much more sophisticated in your practice, you're much wiser, you are a suitable vessel, because you're so fiercely driven by this wish to benefit others. And you know that what's holding you back from being capable of that is literally your delusions. So therefore, you are so happy to meet situations in which people harm you, because that smashes the enemy, which is your delusions, So it's a really profound level. And that's where what those 42. We've got time. We can touch on this. This is important. So this is why the key, this text that all the Tibetans love, which is the essence of this approach of exchanging self for others, is expressed in those 8 verses of mind transformation. On the face of it, they sound like cute verses. When you analyze, these are outrageous practices, just outrageous. Even the first verse, it says, in order to get the benefit from sentient beings, and even that we have to understand. What does it mean, get the benefit from sentient beings? Because you're so driven to develop this infinite compassion and love and affection for sentient beings and want to help them, to lead them to enlightenment, which means you have to become qualified. And what's stopping you from becoming qualified is your delusions. And so what compassion is, you want this compassion. What compassion is, is for wanting a person not to suffer. So if you never meet a person who's suffering, how could you ever have compassion? It's literally not possible. So that's why, the Buddha's father tried to prevent his son from seeing suffering, because he knew he had a big heart and he'd be driven to renounce it and go and give up suffering. So he tried to make him happy all the time until the Buddha saw suffering. Then he saw suffering. It triggered his compassion. It's obvious. So that in order to get the benefit from all these suffering sentient beings, meaning that's why bodhisattvas don't want to go live in the bloody trees. That's the retreat mode. Okay, go to the mountains, get some realizations, but they need to be in the middle where all the suffering people are, because that's grist for their mill. So in order to make the most of that, of all these suffering sentient beings, and then it says, who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Okay, we don't know what a wish-fulfilling jewel is, but why don't you just say they are more precious to me than 1,000 euros or 1,000, whatever you call them in Switzerland. That's really a million. Who are more precious to me than $1 million. That's demented. You think, what are you talking about? So it shows the intensity of these people, these bodhisattvas, I will take care of them, or something like that all the time. And think of, so it's huge. And that's the thing, when you hear about love and compassion, you're not just having this intellectual idea, it's this affection these people have. It's almost hard to imagine that a person can have that level of affection for you, But when you see these bodhisattvas, when you see them, you can't help but see it, It's extraordinary. So the second verse, I always joke and say that if you're a therapist and you gave this advice, they could sue you. The second verse says, and this is too hard, this is why Pabonka Rinpoche says you've got to be a suitable vessel to hear these teachings. The second verse says, when you're among other people, see yourself as the lowest of all and see everybody else as superior. I mean, that is demented for as far as we're concerned. We just can't understand that. We'll say, excuse me, mate, I already do that, We have this self-loathing. That's why if you don't understand attachment and don't understand self-loathing and don't understand anger, having done the first and second scopes, you can't possibly hear this instruction. It seems so gross, So it's an advanced practice. The person who's capable of hearing that appropriately is the person who's already given up attachment and love and anger and neuroses and has controlled their body and speech and has a deep view of karma. They're already highly advanced. There's no question. So all you can do is think about it and see the meaning of it. Because if you're trying to smash self-cherishing, even though, we can see because we have ego grasping, we have attachment, we have aversion, we do cherish ourselves. It's so deep, though, we just don't notice the depth of it, I think. They're so primordial. It seems cruel to point it out. It sounds so heavy. But when we understand that it's the default mode is this. So even when we're with other people, it doesn't take us too long to start criticizing. We know that. We're always going to find fault, You're talking to somebody and you're checking their nose, they're a bit fat and they don't like this and they eat their meal wrong. We're always finding fault. We don't like to admit to it, but always we're finding fault. So here we're trying to do the opposite. Literally, now not in that craven way. If you're craving for people to adore you, then you try run around being a nice girl. That's not what we're talking about here. But it's a powerful state of mind. People, I've seen this. When His Holiness Dalai Lama was invited to Europe, Lama Yeshe was one of the inviters in 82 in Spain, Italy, and he asked some of us to be, I was part of the entourage, he asked us to be these security guards, right? So it's incredible to be up close and observe His Holiness, First of all, he's very powerful. He's very charismatic. He looks he's a very powerful person. He looks like that. But everybody who met him was in tears. It was incredible. In Australia, the same, he was there for like 9 weeks. And we did a special issue of Mandala magazine about his visit. And I interviewed like 50 different people, the police, the guards, the media. Everybody said the same thing. When you were with him, you felt that you were his best friend, you just automatically. And he wasn't all kind of gooey. It was just something that you can only really feel from a person who has really got that level, It's incredible. And that's what they say about these bodhisattvas. They actually do, because there's no longer this neurotic eye, no need to be fulfilled, finished attachment, finished anger, finished jealousy, finished self-cherishing, which is hard to imagine. They only have affection. But they're wise, They're not sentimental, wishy-washy love and compassion like we've got. It's very powerful because it's driven by wisdom that sees your mind, So the third verse is something like, the third verse, something like, to watch him, never mind that one. The fourth, fifth, and sixth are really intense. They're really intense, these fourth, fifth, and sixth. The fourth one, I think, is sort of related to the world out there that's distant from you. Like you hear about bad. So it says something like, when you hear about, evil people. We don't use that word much. I can't think of the word they use. Who are overwhelmed by suffering and negativity. And they say when you hear about these rare people. Maybe back in the 10th century Tibet they were rare, but every day we're hearing about these psychopaths. We'd call them psychopaths, wouldn't we? This evil person overwhelmed by negativity and suffering. That's what we mean by a psychopath. I mean, we hear about them every day. We're bombarded by it because we have so much news. So they're not rare. I will see that person as if I found a precious treasure. That's how they say. So again, if the reasoning behind all these verses is to counteract your instinct to put I first, which means attachment and aversion. So and because you're really on this path seriously, like suffering and unhappy things are grist for your mill. You've got to be advanced for that. You've got to be strong, If you're in a lousy relationship where you're being abused every day, this is not your practice. You've got to get the hell out of that person's life, The next one, get a bit closer to home. This feels to me it's a bit like at work for us. A person who accuses you of something you didn't do. I will happily take the blame and give the victory to them. This is insane. Even when we did do something wrong, we can't admit to it, It's really clear because the instinct is to protect myself. So this is a powerful practice. It's incredibly, and that you can misuse that too. You can be a victim in a relationship and take the blame the whole time, like so many people who are victims in heavy-duty relationships and say, "Oh, well, I deserve it." That's not what being saying here. It's so opposite. It's a joke, you know. That's really intense. The third one, I think, is the closest to home. Your beloved, your child, your partner, and it says, "Those whom I have so much hope for, and whom I've basically sacrificed your life for, loved and adored and taken care of, and they turn against you, they reject you." That's so common. Mothers whose children don't talk to them, children who you know, whose mothers reject them. I mean, or partners, commonly, partners who leave you, you know, for another version after 40 years of giving your life to them. That's the most unbearable suffering. And what's the practice there? I will see them as my guru. So these practices are pretty intense, but we can try, at least read the verses and aspire to have this level of courage, this level of incredible courage, basically, you know, because this is so naked. This kind of experience is so typical for everybody, and these are why we suffer so unbearably in exactly these situations, you know. So it's very intense. So the next verse, I think that's where Tonglen comes in. And the final verse, and that's where we can talk about emptiness. The next verse says, "I will indirectly and directly give all my goodness and virtue to others and take upon myself their suffering." And that's Tonglen. I think that's the technique that really, and I find it very interesting that so many people in the West love this technique, although it's outrageously advanced, you know, but people seem to love it. That's Tonglen. That's the essence. That's Tonglen. And that's the technique that does finally make that shift that then culminates in bodhicitta when you've accomplished it, you know. Where you visualize the person in front of you with a headache, say, and you visualize breathing in, taking upon you their suffering. In other words, you're thinking, I'd rather have the suffering than them. So you've got compassion first. May you not suffer. Then you have this unique characteristic of the compassion of the bodhisattva path, which is great compassion, mahakaruna. It's the crucial one. It says, what can I do to take away the suffering? This is huge. And this third one, Tonglen, is like, for me, it's like cream on the top, like the cherry on the top. It's, you go, you know what? I'd rather have it than you. That's Tonglen. So it's intense practice. Intense practice. And just do it. It's like putting atomic bombs under your, you know, under the delusions, you know. So when you breathe in, you imagine the person's free of suffering, and you happily take it upon yourself, and you visualize your little rock at your heart, like you're self-cherishing, smashing it. And then when you breathe out this radiant light, and you imagine giving this person your happiness, your health. It's a powerful practice. And you can do this every day, you know. I always think you go down the street and you see a homeless person. About the last thing we'd think about is wanting to be homeless. But you can do the practice. You can go, if only I could, walk over there, give them, you know, take away their suffering, give them my keys, my car, my clothes, and exchange position. I'll sit on the ground and they go to my home. You can do that meditation. We don't even want to think about it. It's too horrible. It's an effort to even give them $5, you know. We'd rather walk on the other side of the road. That's powerful, just to have the thought. Just to have the thought, if I could, I would. Just to have the thought is tremendously powerful. Tonglen, bodhicitta, 12 o'clock. I'm in Santa Fe at the moment, not in New York. Any questions, people? Any questions? Any questions? Hang on, any questions? No questions?
I have a question, may I?
Go on, talk to me. Yes, Maria.
All those behaviors and attitudes reflect typical or whatever an attitude that a mother has. Does it help to think that we should see ourselves as mothers of everybody else, or kind of that we are mothers for others and the others are mothers for us, kind of this attitude?
I hear your words, but I missed the very first part. So ask me the question again.
No, the question is, does it help? Does it help us to think that when we reach the level of, to reach all those levels, is to see ourselves as mothers, not
question. I think, oh, absolutely. They often talk about, one analogy they say is that when you're a bodhisattva, everybody's been your precious mother and you want to repay their kindness. But I think the other one is very powerful. You are like a mother. Every being is like your child. Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. There's no question. That is the level of affection, genuine loving affection that people who are like this have for you. There's no question. Yes, absolutely.
Sorry. Because you
Powerful.
love your child, even if he makes mistakes or if he makes something that harms you, you still love that child.
That's exactly right. And this is where this love and compassion here comes with wisdom. You know their mind well, you understand why they're suffering, and you understand why they're causing other people suffering. That's the basis of your compassion for them, and you want them to be happy. There's no question. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Maria. Very good one. Someone else, any points?
Andreas?
Nothing? Somebody you know? Okay.
Andreas?
Yeah, I would have a short question. Thank you very much for instructions. I think this was mostly very clear. You made this very nice example if somebody says, you did something wrong or you stole something and it feels wrong. And then we feel this kind of very intense, is this the ego that we feel that we want to protect? No, that's not true. And sometimes if I have a very good day, I can catch myself, oh yes, thanks. I think you helped me just to find my whatever I want to defend. But then what do I do next?
So you mean if someone's okay, so you mean if someone accuses you of doing something you didn't do, is that what you're saying?
For example, then I feel this kind of inner, I know, pressure. Do you want to defend it? And I think that's interesting, but the question would be, after realizing that this is my inner whatever I want to defend, that's probably not real, what should I do with this moment?
My feeling is, I mean, the instruction is very clear, and you can decide at any given time. Let's say let's just say in a shop, and a stranger says, excuse me, you try to push in, and they get mad, and you didn't. That's a good example. Oh, I'm so sorry. You take the blame. You understand me? That's a good example
Yeah.
where if someone smart, but if it's your family, I would suggest if it's like maybe your family, or it could be your work where you're accused of stealing and you're going to go to jail for 10 years. I mean, you've got to decide what level at which you do this practice. They're not set in stone. You can apply these different tools at different times, but maybe at work, and maybe it might be appropriate that this is exactly not the practice to do. It might be the perfect thing for you to defend yourself. So you've got to see the context and the piece, the person, the time, the event. It's just giving you a list of instructions to put in your toolkit, and at different times you take this tool or you take that tool and apply them at different times. But certainly if it's like in a line at work or at home, and it's a little small thing, or your wife accuses you of doing something, a little time, I'm sorry, you're right. And with not being a martyr, that's a really good opportunity. Do you understand? I'll tell you one story though. I like this story. I tell it a lot. One time in Australia years ago, there's some group of Buddhists having a party, and John, who had the party, I think his name was John, I don't know, he was telling everybody how he had his brand new BMW had been scratched, right? So he got a new door, and then he discovered it was scratched again, and he found out it was this crazy old bloke next door. He didn't know why. But this old man next door, he was scratching his car. He must have thought he was doing something wrong. So I remember he said to the people, what should I do, So when someone said, oh, well, scratch his car, sue him or whatever. And then my friend George at the party, he said, well, I'll tell you what Lama Zopa would do. He would discover what this old man liked and buy him a beautiful gift and offer it to him and apologize for whatever he'd done wrong. So John thought this was wonderful. So he did that. He discovered this old guy liked golf. And he had no idea what the old guy thought he'd done wrong, but obviously the old guy thought he'd done something wrong. And so anyway, he bought this guy beautiful golf balls, wrapped them beautifully, went to his back door, offered the gifts and apologized. He said, I'm so sorry for whatever I've done wrong. So anyway, John felt happy. He felt really good about it. He's sitting in the kitchen having a cup of tea. And this guy comes in, beaming from ear to ear with his gift unwrapped. And he thanked this John, was so happy. And he said, this is the kindest thing anyone has done. And he said, everything is forgiven. Now, I mean, I think that's such a wonderful story, isn't it? Because
Nice. Thank you.
I love that one. So that's a really nice approach. If, say, someone at work or something, I don't know. But you got to, I mean, of course, because the instinct is immediately for the I to rise up and feel so hurt, So we've got to struggle past that. But to get to a point where you can actually do it quickly, that's advanced. Even just saying to the person, I'm sorry, and accepting the blame, So start with the small things, Andreas. Don't wait till you've been accused of being a murderer or something. Start with when your wife is annoyed with you. Start with the baby ones, and then you get stronger. Do you understand me?
That's a good advice. Thank you.
Okay. So let's keep going now. Bodhicitta, I actually got this outrageous shift in your mind, this unbelievable person. You just got to read about these people. The qualities are so extraordinary, They're way beyond what we'd imagine. Then then the next stage of practice, once you've achieved bodhicitta, is you now begin the job of benefiting others. All the activities now, because you've got wisdom and this profound bodhicitta, up until then you're refraining from harming. You control your body and speech. You refrain from delusions. You go to the next level, you're refraining from self-cherishing. You finally get bodhicitta. Now you're this pretty outrageous person, and now you go through life after life, long-term view, these bodhisattvas. Bodhicitta has two main qualities. The first one is literally you now are, others are what's in the front of your mind. It's no longer the thought of I. There's no usual thought of that usual I. It's gone. I mean, it's outrageous, So then only others are in your mind, and it's like as if you're the most precious. To Maria's point, you're like their mother. Everyone is your responsibility. Then the other one is you have this fierce, long-term, never giving up aspiration to never give up, life after life after life, perfecting yourself, because you've got to keep moving. You've got to perfect the compassion wing, and that's where you now do the first four perfections: generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance. And then on your cushion, you perfect the last two of the six perfections, which is concentration and emptiness, realization of emptiness. And this is what you do from life after life after life until you've perfected the two wings of the bird and you achieve Buddhahood, So the first four perfections are what you do in relation to sentient beings. And this is the perfecting of the compassion wing. The first one is they call it generosity. And it's a kind of a profound practice. I mean, I think we can see that all different kinds of people. Some people are naturally more generous. Some people always feel poor and don't want to give anything. And so we really can see it's a very powerful practice there's three levels of generosity. The first one is to give material things. And that's the hardest one. The second one is giving spiritual advice. Frankly, I think we love giving spiritual advice, which is meant to be more difficult than giving, but no, not for us. We love giving advice. But this first one is a very good practice because we do like to be generous, but usually, again, only to our beloveds, And even then, when you're giving things to your family, you buy a new set of, knives and forks, and you give your old set away. I mean, how generous is that? How about giving a new set, We're not really very generous. We really think of mine very strongly, and we count our pennies. Even if you've got money in the bank and lots of savings, it doesn't come naturally to give things. It doesn't, I mean, some people it does, but we've got to practice it because already you do that, you're chipping away at this kind of, I mean, it opens you up for others. It's a starting point. It's the stepping stone to practice generosity. In other words, it's an attitude you're trying to cultivate as a bodhisattva, that whoever you meet, bodhisattvas, you see, whoever they meet, that's their responsibility. So then, of course, whoever you meet and they need something, you give it to them. That's the attitude, rather than, oh, it's only to my child or my next door, my beloveds. But that's the attitude of the bodhisattva. Like Maria said, whoever you meet, that's your child. So what are their needs? So you don't be foolish and run around throwing money at everybody. You be intelligent about it. But it's cultivating this view, as Lama Zopa says, like bodhisattvas, don't think of receiving, think of giving. It's an attitude to change, and it makes you more courageous and much more open. And if you can be very generous with things, you're more generous with your mind as well. It's obvious, with your time, with your energy, with your wish to help others. It's powerful. The second one is morality, which is now the practice of benefiting others. The logic here is this is the action of benefiting, not the action of refraining, the action of benefiting, the implication being you've got enough wisdom to see how to benefit, you know people's minds. So it's a huge one. That's massive. The next one is patience. And this is a heavy duty one. Patience, we think it's a dirty word, quite frankly. I think we think of patience being passive aggression. But patience is actually, I mean, it comes here as a practice in the compassion stage, you know, at the high advanced stages, way back at the beginning when we start working on attachment and aversion. The obvious opposite of aversion, of anger, is patience. But it's really a struggle. But here we actively really trying to practice it. And so that means, like with the bodhisattvas, like in those 8 verses, you know, the very first level of patience is literally being they call it being patient in the face of abuse. So right there for Andreas, another practice would be someone abuses you, you eat it up for breakfast, you know, instead of that impulsive hurt that comes. So patience really is a very brave attitude. And I think the more you understand attachment that grasps at getting what I want every second, then the more you understand anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants every second. And then when you understand anger, it's like a panic attack, you know. Oh my God, that should not be happening. Go away. So what patience is a powerful view that you have to practice that greets the problem. You don't resist it. You greet. Anger is literal resistance, isn't it? Panic. Oh my God, that should not be there. We literally panic. So practicing patience means not resisting, opening, seeing it for what it is, greeting it, so your mind is stable. It's very powerful practice, you know. It's not being a martyr. It's not being passive aggressive. It's very personal. It gives you incredible courage mentally, you know. And the interesting thing is, when you have panic and aversion, you just see this big fat lump of ugliness. But when you look into it, open your eyes to it, open the door to it, observe it, it dissipates. It's not nearly as bad as you thought, you know. The next one is enthusiastic perseverance. And this is one that's really powerful. They say this is the most important of these 4. So it sounds a bit weird, you know, enthusiasm, perseverance, joyful effort, enthusiastic perseverance. It sounds kind of a bit weird, you know. So when we look at the opposite of it, it puts it into clear perspective for us. And we will all recognize it's very, very powerful. The opposite is laziness. And there's 3 kinds of laziness. The way they say them in the text is slightly different, but I like to put it this way. And we'll understand this exactly. We'll understand this. So the first kind of laziness is if, you know, and I mean, this of course is all about your practice. They even call having enthusiasm for samsaric activity is a type of laziness, but we'll forget that one. But just think of, let's just say something like, you know, you decide to go to the gym. You want to get fit. So, I mean, and this is samsaric, I realize, I'm just giving you an example in our daily lives. So, you know, first of all, you get enthusiasm. Okay, one of the points is about enthusiasm. The Lamas all say you will only have enthusiasm to do something when you know the benefits. And that's really clear. We all know the benefit of a delicious meal, and nothing's going to stop us, you know, because we know the benefit. No one, I mean, even the gym, we can see the benefit and we get all excited. Now, but look what happens. You go to the gym, you get excited. You go there in the evening after work. You go, you're all excited. You come home, you feel really good. Next day, you go to the gym, you come home. And the next day, you go, can't be bothered. Can't be bothered, you know. So can't be bothered is the first kind of laziness. And so what is it? You have to think carefully. What is it you can't be bothered doing is the thing that takes effort. It's obvious that anything you can't do, anything you're not capable of doing, necessarily to do it, you have to make effort. And what that does is disturb our comfort zone. So our grossest attachment is attachment to be in our comfort zone, physical or mental. We don't want to go past our comfort zone. So even if you do go to the gym and you say, I went to the gym today, but you lie to yourself because you did the machine until you started sweating and then you stopped. Well, nothing will change until you sweat. So you know you've got to achieve anything, you've got to go past that comfort zone. You've got to stretch yourself to move forward. And that inertia of that comfort zone, that's unbelievable attachment just to be comfortable. And that stops most of us from ever achieving anything. And that's the grossest level. And it's a gross level. I want to be comfortable. And comfort, physical and mental. So this is the first level and the grossest mistake we make. You can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. The second one is really tricky. you're thinking of the gym, or let's say you practice. You get up, you're all excited, you've been to do a retreat, you come home and you're going to do your practice before you go to work. So you wake up in the morning, you leap out of bed, you do your practice the first day. Same thing, second day, and then third day you wake up and you're particularly tired today. Same thing. You go, I can't be bothered. But then what you'll do is you'll lie to yourself to get yourself off the hook. You'll then say, oh, I'll do it later. You procrastinate, and it's like you feel better, like you've just got yourself off the hook. And that's the worst lie, because we know later, and this is the worst one, not the worst yet, but it's one of the heavy ones for us. Later never comes. And what you end up is you carrying this burden of things you said you'd do later. And it's like carrying a house on your back. It's a heavy one. It's a deep, and it gives us so much anxiety and stress, things we put off doing because it takes too much effort, which is because your attachment doesn't want to be threatened. So we can understand this. We're all the same. Everybody is like this, The third kind of laziness doesn't even sound like it, but it's the one that says, no, I'm not capable. I couldn't do that. And it feels like a virtue. It feels like humility, but it's not. It's the worst laziness of all, because the reality is we can achieve it. But when you understand dependent arising, and it's one step of time, it's incremental. You pave the way. Rome wasn't built in the day. You take one step at a time, all these sayings we have. So when you understand logically, it is possible, but you've got to go incrementally, one step at a time. And then you feel better about it. But you've got to there's no question, you've got to make effort. You will never learn anything ever if you don't make effort. And that shows us, it proves to us the intensity of our attachment, the fear of getting out of our attachment zone, our comfort zone, Most people, staying in their relationships, which is crummy, staying in bad jobs, staying in a certain situation, not able to change, scared of change, scared of being alone, scared of making decisions. I mean, we see this is what holds most of us back, because we attach to our comfort zone, and then we get guilty. So we kind of beat ourselves up, or we put off things. The Lamas say it's one of the saddest ways to die. Now it's too late. The things that you regretted that you didn't do, I think we all recognize this so clearly. So without this, we won't succeed. It's very simple. Without this, we won't succeed. But I think if we just try and see it's incremental, then we can be more brave. It's one step at a time. You don't start doing 50 push-ups at the first day. You do 3, then you go 4, then you go 5, and it's incremental. And then you rejoice at each stage. Then you get more enthusiasm, But it demands effort. It demands discipline. Effort means discipline. But you've got to know the benefits, and you've got to remind yourself daily of the benefits, and then go very slowly, one step at a time, But the other point about practice is also is very much in the mind, aspirations. So, for example, Lama Zopa, because of who he is at, where he's at, since little boy, he never cared about sleep. He was a yogi in the past life, didn't sleep. So he developed the habit to not sleep. So for him, he was ahead of the game, right? So he's famous for never sleeping. He never laid down. He never was he was always in cross-legged. He never went to sleep. So then I say to myself, oh, I must be like Lama Zopa, but I would die of exhaustion and go mad if I suddenly stopped trying to sleep. I'm not capable. So you've got to know what you're capable of, but that doesn't mean I say, oh, that's just too hard, I can't do that. What I say instead is, and when you realize karma in your mind, I say, may I be like that? And so I remember Venerable Roger saying one time about Lama Zopa that sleep for Rinpoche was a disgusting waste of time. So I say to myself, when I hit my pillow and I love my bed at night, may I find sleep disgusting. And I mean it sincerely. I can't do it now, but that will program my mind. If you realize karma, it's not that difficult. You have all these aspirations. May I be like that? May I get courage? May I? And don't just think it's wishful thinking. It's powerful seeds you're planting in your mind. So next life, I won't need much sleep. I'm very happy. I'm prepared to wait. So it's being wise as well, We've got 15 minutes left to talk about dependent arising and emptiness. We might have to have another day, I think.
Okay.
Any questions about what we've discussed so far, the Bodhisattva path? No? No questions, people? I see. So this is where you're perfecting all from Bodhisattva on. The wisdom wing is the first part, where you're controlling your body, speech, and mind, abiding by the laws of karma, harnessing your energy, controlling, getting stability. Then you shift the emphasis, working on your mind in relation to others, and culminates in bodhichitta, and then all perfecting all these life after life. And the last two are really tacked on the end, and they're the end of the wisdom wing. If you're on the Theravada path, you don't do the bodhisattva path. You have the last two perfections, and they're brought back to the Hinayana path. It's the middle scope, because they're not in their nature bodhisattva teachings. They're Hinayana teachings, you know. I mean, shamatha is made up by the Hindus. It's not even Buddhist. So here, though, I mean, I think I'm not going to go much about it. We'll do another time. We've done it before anyway. But the key thing, I think the main thing about being a Buddhist is what you're trying to see you're doing is step by step, radically reconfiguring your views in your mind about self and the universe. That's what you're doing. And basically what Buddha's saying is, it's his essential point, is that because of delusions in the mind, because of misconceptions in the mind, first the emotional ones like attachment and aversion and jealousy, but also the philosophical views of no karma, no cause and effect, my mind is my brain, there's a creator, all these big philosophical views. Buddha would argue that they're misconceptions. He's not being rude. So all these misconceptions in our mind, he says, are why we are suffering, are why we're limited, why we suffer. And they are what are preventing us from being our natural state, a Buddha. So it's one way of saying what the entire Buddhist path is a gradual process of stripping away the misconceptions from the mind, stripping away the misconceptions from the mind until eventually there are none left. And the last one to go is the root delusion that believes in intrinsic me and intrinsic everything else. And everything in the path up to then prepares you for it. It leads you to it, you know. And what you're doing throughout the path is already reconfiguring your concepts, getting in touch with conventional reality. So all the first stages are getting in touch with conventional reality, and now you can get in touch with ultimate reality. Your mind is ready, you know. It's very logically in nice progressive stages. And then all this hard work is smashing the delusions, putting atomic bombs under the delusions. And now with your concentration, you can sit in your meditation and realize emptiness, you know. Finally, remove the subtlest delusion of all, the deepest, most primordial misconception that sees everything as having an intrinsic nature. That's the idea. It's very incremental. So like I said, the key point Buddha's making is that we're not in touch with reality. There's this disconnect. And so we're just lessening as we progress through the stages, controlling our body and speech, controlling the grosser delusions, developing bodhicitta, doing the 6 perfections. What we're doing is radically reconfiguring our mind, lessening the neuroses, lessening the misconceptions, getting in touch with conventional reality, but especially with bodhicitta. You see, with bodhicitta, you have such unbelievably powerful, courageous love and compassion that nothing can disturb you. So, you know, if you had got, let's say, so concentration, the 5th perfection, is a Hinayana teaching. It's a Hindu teaching. And even when you hear about just getting the bliss and clarity and joy that your mind can experience, which is what Buddha is telling us is our natural state, just by having single point of concentration, forget even about emptiness. This is so inconceivable that if you get that before you get bodhicitta, you're going to forget all about sentient beings, you know. Who cares? All you want to do is get out of samsara, to be in bliss. They say the bliss of having accomplished this reality, this nirvana, you can't even describe it. And it's like, I mean, I remember one time, because some of the teachings in Buddhism say that once you've achieved nirvana, your mind literally disappears. There's nothing left. But the Prasangika Madhyamika view in Mahayana says your mind is endless. And what actually happens when you stop being reborn because you've achieved your liberation, you go into this subtle state of bliss. And then one day, Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder, says, okay, honey, get out of that bliss now, get back onto the Mahayana path, become a Buddha so you can be a benefit to others. And one Lama said, giving up that bliss is the worst suffering you can ever imagine. It's interesting. So that, when you, even just when you hear Lama Yeshe talking in Mahamudra, his book, talking about the intensity of the clarity and bliss that your mind experiences, that we don't have that in our psychology, I promise. There's no technique like that in the West, promise. It just sounds too hippy trippy to us. But this is our natural state. This is before you even realize emptiness, The mind, free even temporarily of a grosser levels of conceptuality and the sensory, and therefore the delusions. You can't imagine. Lama Yeshe says it's like your mind, it's as if you can count every atom in the universe. The joy, the radiance, the peace of it is inconceivable. So why would you bother helping sentient beings if you get that too quickly, So Tsongkhapa puts it at the end. It's just my comment on that, So it's interesting. You get that concentration, and because you're now clear about conventional reality, it's much easier at that point to realize emptiness and to jump into it first, But bottom line is the delusions, as Lama Zopa says, what the delusions do, what the misconceptions do, the grosser levels, the philosophical views, the emotional ones, the gross, the subtlest one, what they do is they're made up concepts, and they're made up concepts, and they are misconceptions. They are thoughts, but they're not in sync with how things exist. There's a disconnect between what we think and what does exist. That's the dualism that we're trying to cut. And the final dualism that is finally cut is when we've realized emptiness and perfected it and achieved Buddhahood, Then there's no longer, finally for a Buddha's mind, there's no longer even the dualism between conventional and ultimate reality. And that's the key methodology that Tsongkhapa praises. The conventional reality is the king of logics, dependent arising is the king of logics to prove emptiness. So even the highest level bodhisattva, the highest level yogis in meditation will have a direct insight into emptiness, let's say. There's no appearance of anything dualistic. There's no appearance of conventional reality. But when they come out of their meditation and they go into the kitchen for their cup of tea, there's this disconnect again. But the biggest thing for the bodhisattva, for the yogis, they know it's not true. They don't believe in the karmic appearance of out there existing from its own side cup of tea. It appears dualistic. It appears out there as being inherent, but they don't believe it because they've got wisdom. Whereas for the Buddha, finally, there's no longer that disconnect. That's the final non-duality between the appearances of conventional and of ultimate reality. They're simultaneous. So the whole path is going from the most intense dualism of nightmarish negativity and suffering and garbage and violence and misery and despair to lessening those, and then getting bodhicitta, making this paradigm shift, being close to sentient beings, wanting to benefit, perfecting it with the 6 perfections, and finally removing the root delusion. So it's this gradual process from intense suffering and crazy ideas to being in sync with reality. And you're a Buddha. And now your mind pervades the universe. There's nowhere your mind isn't. Your mind has omniscience. You see everything as it exists, and particularly the minds of others. You see exactly how to benefit them. You have infinite compassion that only wants to benefit them, and you have infinite power to benefit them, including manifesting your mind in billions of bodies, throughout billions of universes, for billions of eons, for the sake of billions of sentient beings. That's where we're heading, one step at a time. Okay? That'll do. Question, Viviana, yes.
Okay. Hi, Venerable.
Yes.
I try to do my question. When you sit in meditation and at a certain...
Viviana, before you say any further, you must tell me what you mean by meditation. There's a billion kinds. What do you mean?
When you do your practice, you
okay.
sit on your cushion and then you try to concentrate by that single point. You try to...
You mean when you're Viviana, I'm sorry, I have to ask you the question. You mean when you're sitting in concentration meditation? Just that?
Yes.
Not the visualization meditation, not saying mantra meditation. You mean single-pointed concentration meditation?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes. Okay. And the center point start a little bit sense of equanimity, not also for the people, but you feel equanimity also for some things that happen in your life, things bad or good. And you feel equanimity for bad and good things.
I'm really lost, Vivian. I have no idea what you're telling me. What you said, first of all, you're sitting in concentration meditation. Well, if you're sitting in concentration meditation, you wouldn't be having any of these thoughts. So I don't know what you're asking. You have to ask me a different way what you're asking. I don't understand your question at all. Because if you're doing concentration, Viviana, there's no discussion of things and people and equanimity. That's not the issue at all. So what do you mean, sweetheart?
So when you spoke about the practice of equanimity.
Equanimity specifically, Viviana, is seeing each person wants to be happy and each person doesn't want to suffer. That's all. That's equanimity. So your question?
Okay. Okay, no, okay.
I think what you're saying is, forget about meditation. You were saying something like, as a result of your practice, you have these experiences. So explain to me experiencing and what is your question about them?
Because sometimes good things happen and sometimes bad things happen. But my state,
That's right.
my
That's
mental state becomes quiet and calm. But my mental state is still calm, quiet.
So what's the question, darling? What's the question, Viviana?
What is this in practice? What is this situation?
I don't understand the question at all, Viviana. Start again. Keep it very, very simple. Ask it as a question. You're explaining you have some experience and you want to know about that experience. So ask me again. Try again. Try again. Keep it simple.
Okay, because I studied that equanimity is also a state of mind when you stay calm, quiet.
That's what I mentioned before. There is a type of equanimity because of your practice, because you're developing some qualities. When bad things happen and good things happen, you can stay stable. That's good. The equanimity I was talking about before. So don't discuss that. So what you're saying is sometimes when bad things happen and when good things happen, I stay stable. And then what's your question about that? What's your question?
No, I don't know. No, also I want to tell this also. I want to tell also this.
You want to tell me that that's what's happening for you. Well, I will rejoice. And I think, good, that's a sign of success. Keep going. Well done, Viviana. We will all rejoice for you. That's it. Wonderful. Happy to hear it. Good done. Well done. That is a proof, as we say in English, that's the proof of the pudding.
Okay.
Good done. Wonderful, Viviana. Okay, you people, time to go. We dedicate. Put the prayer up. I think put the prayer up there, Tara. Just a little prayer. 90 minutes talking, me doing all the talking, asking questions, but all we're thinking, each one of us listening, thinking, analyzing. So even 1% of it makes sense. Try to put it into practice. And like Viviana, we can see success if we can stay stable, not go berserk. How wonderful. It's a proof. So we think, due to this virtuous karma of listening to these teachings, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha and lead all these suffering sentient beings into enlightenment. And then may this bodhichitta that has been in the minds of others, may it grow, and may where it hasn't grown, where it has grown, may it increase. These nice aspirations, okay? Remembering that practice, a huge part of practice is having positive thoughts. That's a big surprise to us, but it really is. Aspirations, rejoicing, being happy for others, delighting in our progress. This is a huge level of practice, so don't forget it, okay? And may Lama Rinpoche's smile come very quickly and beam upon all of us. Okay, everybody? Thank you, darlings. So kind. Thank you, everyone. Bye, sweethearts.